Welcome back to another topic on object relations thinking and object relations theory and its application to clinical work. Today I've chosen the topic of writing blocks because it is so related to psychological blocks in general and so related to creative self-expression blocks in general. But I'll particularly be talking about someone who is frustrated because they sit down desperately wanting to write and the words are not coming out the way they want them with full range of feeling and thinking that they intuitively know they potentially have, that they have the talent, they have the intelligence, but they can't get it out. Okay, so someone comes to me for this problem. Sometimes they come into one of my writing groups. I now have a current monthly writing group, and they can work on it a little bit there, sharing their writing, but seeing where it isn't going forward and get some feedback from colleagues. But for the real work with the writing block itself, when there's repressed feelings behind a whole defensive structure related to blocking them in self-expression, particularly in writing in this case, they need to have psychoanalytic psychotherapy or psychoanalysis. And in that case, I could work very effectively with opening up what I would call emotional constipation in the person who can't have the self-expression of writing. They sit down like there's a 1-year-old sitting on the toilet, but they feel like they're forcing themselves. They want to write, like a mother forcing them to go to the potty, and they can't get it out because they feel they're being forced. So they can't surrender and let go because they're in opposition to the mommy who's telling them they're forced to do it, except in this case they're adults and they're the ones being the mommy forcing them. And therefore they rebel against it and don't let go and don't surrender to their feelings of right. But what we find out is not only are they emotionally constipated like a 1-year-old who is in a battle with mommy and feeling like she didn't want to go when she was told she had to, but they're also carrying an emotional constipation that relates to unconscious fears of their feelings, particularly of their angry feelings, because we all know that those are the feelings that are so opposed by parental authorities and school authorities. So it's particularly in the area of aggression and anger, sometimes also in the area of sexual instinctual desires, what we call the drives, that people are blocked in free expression. They repress those feelings because they've been taught they're bad, or they've been taught they're a bad kid for being angry. So they start to survive and play the good child in order to be loved and approved of. And what happens? That half their personality is gone because they're repressing their very deep feelings of love and self-expression behind angry feelings that they're afraid of. So when they can't express the anger, they can't express all the other richness of feelings inside of them that would be their own personal voice in the self-expression, creative self-expression, whether it be in public speaking or it be in writing. But there are people particularly who just want to write more than anything else. Creative writing, usually they feel they're blocked when they sit down, even if they know they have the intellect and the talent, and we know together they have it. So I've had people come to me specifically for this, sometimes going through other therapies, and finally coming to me as a psychoanalyst with object relations thinking, where we get to this core self that's like a child inside, that desperately wants to express herself but can't. And ultimately we get back to memories about anger and that they're being stopped in the expression of their feelings. These are one kind of memories. Then we get back to guilt, and we get into associations about guilt and thoughts that they've committed crimes because their parents didn't have the fulfillment that they wanted. So how can they deserve to have self-expression in the way they want to do more than anything else, which is to write and do creative writing or professional writing or whatever kind of writing, but to have that self-expression that would make them feel fully alive as human beings. So I've had people come particularly for analysis, because this comes out in the transference, where I could become that mother who had that they experience in their projections when they're lying on the couch, who's cold and withholding and doesn't or wants to stop them from expressing themselves. Or I can become the mother that's sick in their mind and they have to protect me from their aggression and anger and feelings because it would be too much for me and be hurting the one they love. So in that, as they experience that and relive this, the child comes alive in the present on the couch, we realize why they're being held back, that they're in check because they're repressing their thoughts and feelings when they sit down to write, because they're afraid if they express themselves, the aggression that's going to come out is going to be like an act of murder towards a mother usually, or a parent. So all this can come out in psychoanalysis, but in the object relations view, we're particularly aware of the internal world. So we're particularly aware of how there's a whole internal sabotaging, internal saboteur, persecutory object, or in the case of a writer, internal negative editor. Internal editor who's giving them negative messages like, oh, that's not good enough, oh, that's stupid, somebody said that before, that's not original, you could do better than that, oh, that's just, these kind of messages, that they're inadequate and why bother expressing themselves, because they're not being original, they're not being brilliant, they're not being whatever that they wish they could be. So they have this negative internal editor saying to them in their internal world, you can't do it, before they even start and sit down. This internal world phenomena comes out in the therapy or in the analysis with the analyst. And then in the moment they can experience how they're stopping themselves and how there's tremendous guilt about their feelings, particularly about their anger, because that's what they've been taught has made them a bad child. So they try to repress it and not have be angry and always have positive feelings. But that leaves them blocked from their love, blocked from their sexuality, blocked in many ways. But the pinpointed way that it could come out is in not being able to write. When they have an internal editor telling them that their anger is bad, then no love can come through, sex can't come through. Sometimes it can, but particularly the anger is blocked. Sometimes the anger blocks all these other feelings, sometimes it's the anger in itself that's blocked, and more loving feelings can come through, but it's not enough for the writing, because writing has to have a full dimension of the human being, with aggression, love, hate, warmth, everything, passion of all kinds, thoughts and feelings of all kinds, to allow it to come in a free associative way, just like someone has on the couch expressing themselves to the analyst. So here we see the parallel between sitting down to write and being there on the couch with the analyst expressing oneself, because both are about free association, having thoughts and feelings come freely, having an idea for a story if you want to write it, poem you want to write it, a paper you want to write it, but letting it come through. Emotional constipation could be from the time of toilet training where you felt you were forced against your will to go to the potty when you didn't want, or it could be later levels of things where they just told you to stop your anger, not to have a tantrum, or not even to express what you're, because you could get so upset they were afraid of your anger, so they wouldn't even let you get it out there in words. That all comes up in the present with the analyst, and that's how the writing blocks get resolved. There's an internal editor that gets understood. All the messages get understood as this goes back to an actual parent or parents or siblings or others that were there in your early life, and that's how you realize what's blocking you today in self-expression, and particularly in writing if you want to write. There are other forms of creative self-expressions this affects too, but since I'm a writer and I'm a dancer, I think of particularly blocks in those areas, and I've been working in my practice with people with writing conflicts, inhibitions, and yet the desire to write. I help anyone with a desire to write to deal with the blocks, conflicts, and to become aware of who their internal editor is so they can own the feelings behind the power of the internal editor and start to own their power that's in the aggression of the internal editor turned against them. Okay, so that's it for today for the writing blocks. I hope you have some ability from this to think about your own deepest voice coming out in creative work. And I will see you next time. Thank you.